This time of year, especially for us Christians, because we're celebrating Easter, or as I prefer to call it, Resurrection Sunday. And to join me to talk about the specialness of Easter is, once again, Dave Moore. Dave, welcome back to Talk of the Desert.
Thank you, Melinda.
I think you're just hanging out on my set is what it is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In my spare time.
Yes, and we've got our Easter colors on. So
Yeah.
yeah, we do. So what is so special, or why should we pay more attention to Easter than we sometimes do?
Well, Easter, Resurrection Sunday, is what sets Christianity apart from every other religion. And it's a day in which, obviously, the celebration is of the resurrection of Jesus. If he was really resurrected, it's a game changer for people and eternity. Because if his claims were true, his claims were people on planet Earth are infected with a thing called sin. And it's deadly. So he came to this planet in order to live a life that showed us how we should live, priority-wise, what's important, what's not. And then he said, to prove that everything I'm telling you is true, I will give my life, and 3 days later, I'll raise from the dead. Then you'll know I really am God's son. Then you'll know sin really is a real problem. Then you'll know that forgiveness is available and salvation. So the whole issue of Christianity really is riding upon the resurrection. Now, you know me well enough to know that I'm not very good on blind faith.
I want facts.
I want facts. For there to be a claim of a resurrection from the dead doesn't fit into our scientific way of thinking. It's never been documented anywhere else. So I think one of the most important things that I would always include in my Easter sermons, as it was why in the world should we believe this? And when you start to walk through the evidence, it's really overwhelming. I mean, things like the prediction that he'd be back in 3 days. Well, that caused all of his enemies to do everything possible to make sure he doesn't show up. So the soldiers around the tomb, the
stone rolled over the tomb.
Yeah, that weighed 2 to 4 tons. And the seal that was on the tomb by Pilate himself. Anyone who would break that seal, the wax and the ring and that thing, capital offense. And so you've got 11 disciples who are absolutely terrorized, hiding. They're not going to assault a Roman Praetorian Guard, each of whom were prepared and trained to defend 6 square feet, so they would stand back to back with their Machaira swords. And I mean, the elite of the elite were guarding that thing. So when you start to think objectively about the historical story, the facts associated with the Praetorian Guard, the seal, the stone, buried in a borrowed tomb as it had been predicted in the Hebrew Bible. The crucifixion, the manner of death had been predicted in the Hebrew Bible. 600 years before crucifixion was even invented. Talks about the arms stretched out, the piercing of the hands, the feet, all this. The betrayal by a friend for 30 pieces of silver. Not gold, not copper, not 30, not 29. So you start looking at the Hebrew Bible and all the predictions, and you start looking at the man Jesus and all of these things over which he had no control. Put him in a tomb, obviously dead because the eyewitnesses' death certificate, it required 2 doctors to sign a death certificate of a crucified man. You have the eyewitness evidence of the man who shoved the spear up through the side, pierced the area around the heart, water flows out, medical evidence again that he's really dead. So you put all these things together, and then at the end of the story, the stone is rolled back, the soldiers are out cold, the 250 pounds or so of spices and linen that they wrap the body in is still in place, only he's not in it. In fact, it's interesting that the disciples didn't really believe that Jesus had resurrected from the dead until they walked into the tomb and they saw the wrapping of the body. There was no way to get out of that wrapping, and that was when they believed. And of course, Thomas wasn't there to see it, so he got to see Jesus later.
Doubting Thomas.
Doubting Thomas. So, Melinda, it's just amazing when you put all these things together. There is so much legal evidence. It's the only possible explanation. Now, if you back the tape up in your own thinking, well, if there is a God, and of course, as you look around, you can run with the evolutionary track, you can run with the creation track, and that's a whole other story. But if there really is a God, well, then he certainly could incarnate himself into a physical being, come to earth and say, guys, you got it all wrong. Let me help you out here. And that's really what Jesus did. And as a man, he walked this planet kind and gracious and uncondemning. He didn't reject the caress of prostitutes and Gentiles, people that the Hebrew people of the day just considered dogs and animals. So he came to give us a whole new snapshot of how loving and kind God is. Now, roll the tape forward again. How does he prove what he's saying is really true? Well, the resurrection is pretty good truth, pretty good proof. And then in the end of it, you have eyewitness accounts by hundreds of people who saw him. You have 11 terrified disciples who just 40 days later are in the same streets boldly proclaiming this Jesus who was crucified is risen. You know it, I know it. What are you going to do about it? It has transformed their lives. They turned the world upside down. And I don't know who to compare that to today, but if you could just think of the most nerdy loser possible, that's what the disciples really were. I mean, James and John, they called them sons of thunder. And the reason they call them sons of thunder is because these were two wild, ping, 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 off the wall kinds of characters. And they met Jesus, and he radically changed their lives. Then you have the Apostle Paul, who was actually a Jewish zealot who was killing Christians after the resurrection. He's on his way to arrest some Christians, and Jesus apparently met him on the road, and he fell to his knees. He was blinded by the brilliance of the resurrected being. You've got all the witnesses who are with him going, well, we don't have a clue what happened here. Paul gets down to his destination and realizes that he met Jesus. And so here he went from Christian killer to the most aggressive evangelist of the first century, writing 13 books in the New Testament, traveling on 3 or 4 missionary journeys, however you want to count them. There are no explanations for these radical life changes if there wasn't a resurrection. And so for me, as somebody who show me the facts, I can't look at all the prophecy, look at all the historical facts, look at the changes after the resurrection. There's no way to explain that away. And then, of course, there's the personal experience, and you know all about that. Those of us who have come to believe that Jesus really is the Son of God, we've experienced a radical change in who we are. I used to be really mean. I was an ornery kid.
You were you? Let's talk to your dad about that. So were you really ornery and mean?
Yeah,
huh?
you know, I was never the drug addict, crazy guy like that. But I look back at my junior high and high school days, and I was very unkind, extremely arrogant.
But you're a PK too, which is a preacher's kid.
Well,
and was it a little rebellious?
No, it wasn't rebellion. I don't think it was rebellion. It was a sick arrogance, and had that little experience with, God's obedience school. Figured out maybe I'm not the greatest thing on planet Earth, and He is, and it radically changed everything. From an ornery, arrogant, pompous, self-sufficient person to somebody who was just grateful to be living, happy to engage people of different race and color. Oh, I was so prejudiced.
Really?
Oh, it's terrible, yeah, just terrible. And all that changed. So I put all this together. You've got the prophecies, you've got the historical evidence, you've got the eyewitnesses, you've got the life change of Paul, and then you have life change with yourself, and you go, there's no other way to explain this.
Yeah. And I also like the line that you use that you know of all about all these other religions, and but you've never heard one with a better outcome than Christianity.
Well, it's a happy ending.
That's for sure.
Good ending, yeah.
It is. Now, I do have a question for you, a technical question. Why does Easter change from year to year? Because this year it's April 24th.
You know, it's all tied back to the Passover, and our Jewish friends could probably tell you better than I could, but it has to do with the moon and when the full moon is of this and so many weeks after that, and that's how it works, but I don't remember the details. You got to remember I'm getting old and you're throwing questions off the top of my head.
I'm sorry, you weren't prepared. You didn't do your research.
No, I did zero research for this
facts
today.
to back it up.
Yeah.
Because you need to have those facts. But you know, I think that you would agree, Dave, that really it may be a family event, Easter Sunday.
Sure.
But go because you will hear really a wonderful message.
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier about Sunday morning message on Easter is the most difficult message, I think, of the year for a pastor to prepare, because everybody knows the end of the story.
Yes.
So you're not going to tell them something they haven't already heard unless it's their first time ever in church. And you have the people there who come twice a year, Christmas and Easter. You want to make an impact on them, but putting the story in the context of something that's interesting is just very difficult. So I always tried to put it in the context of, one year I compared it with, I called it A Tale of Two Tombs. And you can get all these messages at moreonlife.com, but A Tale of Two Tombs was contrasting the tomb of King Tut and the tomb of Jesus. And when you walk through the two different tombs, it's two entirely different stories. Yeah. Really kind of a fun way to look at it. And another year there was something about the Titanic, timeless truths from the Titanic.
Something like that, yes.
We talked about how that the Titanic tells us that it's possible to be sincerely wrong. Truth discovered too late is irrelevant, you know, things like that. Yeah. So I always look for some angle that would keep the unchurched person who was drugged there by their aunt engaged, and hopefully build a bridge to them. That there are a lot of weird Christians out there, and we ought not be one of them.
It's really a very simple faith is what it is, backed up with facts for Dave.
Well, yeah, you know me. It's just...
Well, Dave, in the next couple of minutes, tell our audience what you're doing out in the world now, because you've got More on Life as your website, and it's MOORE, onlife.com.
Yeah, More on Life, not Moron Life. That's my kids used to call it. Well, I'm spending about 75% of my time in the corporate world, consulting and things like that. Enjoy that thoroughly. And then about a quarter of my time I invest in moreonlife.com. We have about 2,000 messages on there. Most of them are downloadable by MP3s. Twice a month, if you're on our e-blast list, I send out a 60 to 90 second video. That's just, I call it an e-encouragement. It's like, hey, it's Dave Moore, just want to encourage you today, you know, and I'll tell them some fun little story or a joke. And every Sunday, or once a week, usually it's on Sunday, we post a full 45-minute message video that you can click on and watch. So if church doesn't happen to be your thing or you're not feeling well, you can just click right on More on Life and watch the whole message and kick back. And then once or twice a month, we'll also send out an e-blast with specials that are available, things we put on sale. Yeah. So it's a great ministry. The computers tell us where everybody is clicking on from, and literally it's global.
Fantastic.
Middle East, Africa, South America, China. We know that we have a number of pastors in Africa, for example, who download my messages, and then they preach that to their congregation on Sunday.
Wow. It's fabulous. Absolutely.
And then our Spanish version, Mas de la Vida, listeners a day. Jorge Cota does that part of our...
The world is hungry for the message of the Lord.
They're looking for something that's real and relevant.
Yeah.
And I've always endeavored to be that. And so, you know, More on Life has become a wonderful tool, and I just encourage your listeners to check it out, see what's there, and we post articles. You know, we do all the things that you typically do, except it's not churchy.
It's definitely not churchy.
Not churchy.
That's right. But I want to encourage you to go to church on Sunday, on Easter morning. Yes,
of course, Easter Sunday.
You got it. Well, Dave, thank you for joining me on Talk of the Desert again. And I got to tell our audience, I have a Easter surprise coming up for the second half of the show, which should be a lot of fun. You know, I'm sure your grandkids would love it. So I'll be right back with my Easter surprise.